Hello, and welcome to the Health Go Live webinar series. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Headspace. We would like to remind you that the Q&A feature will be available, so feel free to send in your questions for the panelists throughout the discussion. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator, who joins us from McKinsey & Company, Kana Enomoto.
Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction, and excited to talk to everybody today about the great inspiration and how mental health and wellness can shape the future of work. I'm Kana Enomoto. I'm a senior knowledge expert at McKinsey & Company and co-director of the new McKinsey Health Institute. I have spent years working in the behavioral health field prior to McKinsey, and also in the federal government, leading the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I am thrilled to introduce my panelists today. I will let them introduce themselves, starting with Desiree Pascual from Headspace Health.
Thank you, Kana, and thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Desiree Pascual, also known as Des, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And before I introduce myself, I wanted to take just a moment to express my gratitude for being invited to participate in the conversation today and for being here with everyone in the audience. The last 2 years have demanded a lot of us in the people business. And while it hasn't been easy, I've also seen professionals and leaders across the people ecosystem come together and collaborate in unprecedented ways. And dare I say, I think we're all better for it. So as we get started today, I just want to say that I see you out there. I'm right there with you, and your work matters. So I am the Chief People Experience Officer of Headspace Health, formerly Ginger. We recently merged with Headspace to form Headspace Health, which is a leading provider of mental health and well-being solutions. And we touch the lives of over 100 million people in 190 countries. Our enterprise brands, Headspace for Work and Ginger, are distributed to over 3,500 enterprises. And our members and enterprise partners, employees, have access to mindfulness and meditation tools, coaching therapy, and psychiatry, ultimately helping them to lead healthier and more productive lives. We believe that mental health exists on a continuum. Everybody has it, and everybody can benefit from proactively caring for their mental wellness through access to these various programs, depending on where people are on the continuum. And with that, I want to hand it off to my fellow panelist, Jennifer A. We have 2 Jennifers today.
Thank you, Des, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. And to echo Des, thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. Certainly for me, benefits is my passion, especially mental health and well-being. So Jennifer Elwin, go by Jen. I'm Associate Director of Benefits for our North America benefits with Vertex Pharmaceuticals. And for those who may not be familiar with Vertex, we are a global biotech company. We focus on creating transformative medicines for serious diseases, most known for our multiple medicines for cystic fibrosis, though we have several stuff in the pipeline for other serious diseases, and just about 4,000 employees in 21 countries. So again, thrilled to be here and speak in this important panel. And I agree, Des, I think if anything is taken the past 2 years, I'm certainly an internal optimist. And I think there's been a large focus on how we can support our employees and each other. And, certainly one thing I'm taking away from the last 2 years. So I will turn it over to Jennifer Christian Herman.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm Jennifer Christian Herman. I'm the Interim Vice President of Mind-Body Medicine at Blue Shield of California. I'm a clinical psychologist by training and have spent most of my career focused on how to improve the physical and mental health of individuals and organizations. And I'm very excited to be here to talk about this topic today, as we've thought a lot about that for our 4.6 million members whom we serve, and also our over 7,500 employees that work for Blue Shield.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Obviously, we are set up for a very rich conversation. Before we really dig in, I'd love to start with an icebreaker question, and I encourage everyone in the audience to participate by answering in the chat. But my question is, what is your favorite pandemic hobby or practice? Starting for myself, I have learned how to bake croissants, and that is something that takes about 2.5 days to do the way I do it, I guess. And so that is something that working from home has greatly accelerated. And with that, I will ask maybe Jennifer to lead us off.
Sure. So for myself, I've gotten in the practice of just getting some movement in the middle of the day. I'm a morning exerciser, and usually I would sit at my desk and work all day. And so now, whether it's just taking my dogs out for a quick walk or getting out in the sunshine, I've built that into my day and find it really makes a difference. So Jen, let me pass it to you now.
Yes. Yep. No, I'll go. Yes. And certainly being able to walk during the day with my dog has been great. But I think kind of building off of what you mentioned, I love to cook, love to bake. And so the last 2 years, we actually purchased an outdoor pizza oven. So that has been a great thing, is perfecting my pizza dough, Neapolitan pizza. So it's really, has been one of my favorite hobbies I've picked up the last 2 years. So Des?
Yes, thank you. I'm such a cliche, you all. Like I think many people out there, I am one of those people that got a pandemic puppy. We were working from home, and I just wanted that snuggly little companion, and I got one. And so a new habit that I established during the pandemic is to wake up early, take my puppy for a walk. And then the other thing that I've done, so I'm from Europe, and Mutt actually grew up in 2 countries, Spain and Germany. And so I've also taken up reading again. All the time that we're saving, not commuting, I've redirected that time to reading books in those native languages, which I've tremendously enjoyed. Thank you for asking that question. Such a fun question.
It is wonderful. And it sounds like while these past couple of years have been hard for everyone, there are also some silver linings that we can point to, and ways in which all of us have found to cope, and which is really important to celebrate as we do that. So, today, looking at our agenda, I think we're going to have the opportunity to do several things. One, explore current trends and attitudes around mental health and well-being, which we've already started exploring. Understanding shifting mental health needs and the roles that employers play, who are vitally important in creating a holistic approach to health. Learning how to take preventive approaches to wellness. It's an ounce of prevention, pound of cure is the proverbial saying, right? So what are we doing to stem the tide of this crisis that our country is facing? And then we can take some time to understand what solutions are showing innovative and promising outcomes. I think that's really exciting. So we want to make sure to leave time at the end so we can go to thinking about what's next. So starting off, diving into what some are calling the big quit. We are seeing many people leaving their jobs, and about 75% of people who left their jobs in the last 2 years quit without another job in hand, and are citing mental health as a key reason for leaving. So my question for our panelists today are, where do you see the disconnect between employee satisfaction, mental health, and the modern workplace? Shall we start with Des?
Most certainly, I'd be happy to kick us off. It's such an important question, and such a relevant topic for us to think about in the context of the Great Resignation, which is one of our topics today. The last 2 years have not been business as usual. Rather, they were marked by chronic uncertainty and anxiety, cultural reckonings, trans rights, caregiving, loss, loneliness. So the question here is not so much about, for me, employee satisfaction, but rather that fundamental need to care for the well-being of a workforce that has been struggling. The Great Resignation, I think, has catapulted mental health to the top of our list as business leaders. Employees who reach the end of their rope and quit have been subjected to unprecedented uncertainty, pressure, and hardship. So the continued trends we're seeing require a fundamental shift in how we think about employee wellness and addressing employee needs as we continue to navigate these compound and rapid shifts that we're seeing in our workplaces today. It's no longer just a conversation for me about satisfaction. For many I've seen, it's been about sheer survival. And, I think about people who are historically excluded and marginalized, caregivers, women in the workplace. Through the last 2 years, mental health has risen to the top as one of the focus areas. And it's no longer a nice to have peripheral benefit, but rather a must have as employees are juggling so much. And I would dare to say that the organizations that lag behind on that mind shift and a fresh way of looking at the ROI of offering easy to access comprehensive point solutions will likely also see that reflected in their talent retention and talent acquisition work streams. So I'd love to hear from Jennifer or Jen what your thoughts are about this.
Yes, yeah, no, and I think, and certainly I prefer to term it not the great resignation, right, but the great reassessment or, the great kind of rethought. And I think, as we've just all talked about the last 2 years, I think people have different expectations and people are certainly prioritizing things differently, and certainly their mental health are prioritizing. And I think certainly people are exiting organizations in large numbers and, also going to other organizations. And I think the most important thing that I'm thinking of is we need to look at the reason why people are exiting the organization. You want to make sure, are people exiting because they feel our culture, our environment isn't supportive of their mental health, isn't supportive of their overall well-being? Are they leaving and not going anywhere else because they don't have the tools and resources to manage, whether it's, caregiving for children or for their family? So I think it's taking a real hard look at why people are exiting the organization. One, it's great to, focus on in getting new people into the organization, but we also need to make sure that we're keeping our most valued employees and that we're not just looking to bring things in for people that are joining, whether it's increased salary or increased benefits, but that we're looking at everything we have for all of our employees and that we're focusing on keeping people within the organization. And I think, mental health and well-being is a large part of that, and being willing to have those open and honest conversations about your culture, about our employees' well-being, and not just saying the right things, but doing the right things as well, is kind of the biggest thing that I know my organization is taking away, is that we're not just, saying one thing and doing another, that we really are, walking the walk and talking the talk.
Right.
Yeah, I think, Jen, just to build on what you said, I think so many employers had already recognized the importance of mental health and having a workforce mental health strategy as a business strategy. So I think many employers were already on the way to that. And then when COVID hit, sort of the one size fits all approach to that went out the window. And as you said, different, we're all in the same storm, but all in, different boats. And some of us are swimming in the ocean and some of us are in, on fancy ships. And so I think that it really is understanding, listening to your employees and understanding the unique needs. And it's not going to be a one size fits all approach. And you have to think about what are the organizational things to do, and then what are the specific people things to do in terms of tools and programs and resources.
So Jennifer, just to quickly follow up on that, can you speak a little bit to how employers and health plans can partner together to come up with a holistic approach for their employees?
Sure. Yeah. No. I think that there are sort of important intersections and complementary roles and a real opportunity for partnership. So, from the health plan angle, I think the health plan obviously has a responsibility to provide access to high quality care, recognizing that mental health is on a spectrum. And so it's certainly tools in the upstream space around resilience and mindfulness and stress, but things like EAP, as well as, access to clinical care. But I think there's also an important role around partnership, around data transparency. So sharing data with employers about trends that are emerging, certainly in a way that protects privacy, but just really understand from that perspective what is going on with the workforce. And then employers can take that, pull that together with other data that they have, whether that's employee surveys or more real-time ways of gathering that information from employees, so that that employees can feel heard, and also so that their needs can be understood. So I think that there, whether it's programs, data, consultation, there's a lot of complementary roles and ways that the two can partner together.
I think that's an awesome point about data, because we know that what employers think they're doing and what employees perceive is happening don't always line up. And so those employers that can work with their plans to really get a sense of what's happening on the ground, I'm sure going to be more successful and be able to deliver more tailored solutions for their folks. So I'm interested to ask this next question about what trends you are seeing as far as shifting employee values. So what is it that employees are craving in they're seeing their employers invest in the relationship aspects of work, the softer sides of work. I see Gen Z from our data, Gen Z employees are saying 60% of them think that mental health resources are important when selecting a new employer. So curious to hear what you all are seeing. Jen A, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that I think what employees are expecting is, certainly not kind of, one size fits all too. I think, and Jennifer, you would kind of, you had touched upon that as well, as that employees are expecting more out of their employers, and they certainly want to be the more human aspect of a person as an employee, not just, as an employee. I think for a long time it was just focused on the job and what everyone had to do versus focusing on the person themselves. So I think, and especially different generations have different needs. And one of kind of our philosophies is that benefits and total rewards are truly not one size fits all. And I think what we're seeing in kind of shifting trends, and we've done some listening strategies and some surveys on this, is that people want more personalized offerings, that they want things that resonate more with themselves, and certainly recognize that it's great to have, a lot of offerings, let's say for, family support, but families look very different nowadays, and family isn't one size fits all. So we're seeing a lot of different generations wanting, different personalized benefits. And, certainly that's something that we're looking to focus on. And people want an environment that they feel is psychologically safe, and that they can be their most authentic selves, and they feel they have the ability to speak up. So I think people are kind of wanting a bit more from their employers to make them feel that they are supported as an employee, but also, as a person, and that they recognize their stresses outside of work, and that we need to help them. Because quite frankly, we all spend a lot of time together with our coworkers, and as employers, especially benefit professionals, we need to make sure we're giving people tools to help really integrate their work life. And again, not a focus on just putting a lot of stuff in place, but putting the right programs in place, and realizing what resonates and is important to me is very different than someone that's a Gen Z or someone that's in another generation, walk of life, different people groups as well.
Yeah, I think to build on that too, that there are definitely the organizational things that employers can do. So their policies, just how you think about building workforce culture, when our culture can look very different for many of us who are working from home, but also employers who have frontline employees and virtual employees. I mean, there's culture looks really different right now. And then there are those specific, programs. We've seen a lot of employers really beefing up their EAP offering and offering many more sessions, offering, digital solutions, as Des was saying, in terms of, and we have done that at Blue Shield, both for our members and our employees. So, tools and resources, but also, I think, as always is the case, but even more so now, really authentic leadership and strong communication and a willingness to pivot when you try something and it doesn't work. And just letting employees feel heard and being willing to try new things. I think that this everything is so unprecedented right now, and now we're entering another chapter for many people who've been working virtually, starting to return to work, and all the anxieties and excitement and mixed feelings around that. So I think that just that kind of flexibility from leadership has been, and transparency around that has been really important.
Yeah, and Ken, if I just put one more follow-up point, because I saw a question too in here about, like, do you think the ability to work from home, as part of a workforce can have a positive impact on mental health? And is it playing into the Great Resignation, which I certainly think it is, right? People want, if you want a place where if being remote is important to you or being hybrid is important to you, I think people are really, want their, to align to that and make sure that if it's important for them to be remote or work from home. So I certainly think, that part of it is playing into it, and the flexibility piece you just spoke of, Jennifer, and also in being willing to say to your employees, like, stuff we're doing today may not be right or may not be the same thing we're doing in a year from now. But I think continually saying it's not a set it and forget it. We're going to look at our programs and policies and making sure that we're kind of reiterating or iterating in real time.
That's such a great point. Like, what we're doing today may not be what we're doing a year from now. If you were going to look into your crystal ball, we also have a really good question in the chat. Where do you see, what emerging trends are you tracking, and where do you see the future of mental health in the workplace going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I can start. I mean, I think one thing just to build on what we're seeing, and I think is, it's been such a hard time, not just COVID, but obviously, the increasing, issues and awareness of racial injustice, of just so many things going on, is just this decrease in stigma around mental health and around other things like, social needs and social drivers of health. So I think that, that is a real silver lining of this time. And so I'm hoping that we continue that, just having more open dialogue, in the workplace and schools and everywhere else around the importance of mental health, around challenges that individuals are facing. And then again, building on, that awareness, whether it's things like mental health first aid training for leaders, for all employees, so that there's this expectation of sort of taking care of ourselves and taking care of those around us. So I think that's a trend we're seeing now that I hope will continue into the future.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that point. I think certainly how we're doing stuff today is this is not going to be what we're doing in 5 to 10 years. And I think there'll be, more focus on additional tools and resources, for mental health, and not just relying on, one different thing that's going to support employees. And certainly mental health first aiders, I think it's providing, employees and managers tools, especially from a mental health first aiders. I saw a great point in the chat about, managers aren't therapists. What role do you see them playing in prioritizing mental health? And being a people manager myself, especially when we did go remote, it's when you're not seeing people face to face. It's very different sometimes to try to gauge their mental well-being. And I think as we're all going to adjust to a hybrid or remote environment, that's something that's going to become even more important. So making sure employees and managers, have the tools, whether it is mental health first aiders, manager toolkits, I think is going to be something that's also, going to be something that's going to be a priority over the next few years. And also from, leaders, making sure that that's part of their toolkit as well.
Yeah, I love that point, Jen. Creating an inclusive environment is partly about walking the talk and setting an example, and having leadership send a very clear message that mental health is something that we all have and that we all need to attend to. And when people have struggles, that we encourage them to get the help that they need, and that we have resources available to them is super important. Des, I think I heard you maybe wanting to jump in as well. What do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years in employee mental health.
Yes, well, y'all, this was classic. My internet crashed right at the worst
Always the way.
in my day, right? Isn't that just so classic of what we've all experienced throughout the pandemic as we went fully virtual? And I heard some of what my co-panelists shared, and couldn't agree anymore. Not sure that I have a lot to add, but I think it is that mental health in the workplace, and my apologies if I reiterate something that has been said while I was offline, is that we really need to think about mental health on a continuum. And just as we, and I talked about this earlier when I introduced myself. So just as we brush our teeth every day, to take care of our oral hygiene and our teeth, and as we go to the gym every day to work out, I hope that we will be able over time to normalize access to mental health care resources in the very same way, so that we can practice taking care of our needs early on, and before things escalate to become more, clinically relevant issues. So what we've seen at Headspace Health is that many of our members who come in early and engage early in the process, engaging with the self-guided content, clinically validated self-guided content that we offer, and engage with our coaches, never escalate to higher levels of care or need for higher levels of care. So, and I think my co-panelists also talked about leadership, modeling this, continuing to work on destigmatizing that kind of mental health care. It's become very normal in our community to say, I need a mental health day, much like somebody would take a day off for a physical need that they have, a bellyache or whatever else it may be. And so that is a trend that I hope will continue, because I think in the end we'll all be better for it, and so will our communities.
Thank you. So there is a question in the chat about how employers can walk the talk of inclusion, engagement, culture, and values, and providing help for working parents. I think there's another one saying that shouldn't this be part of a larger cultural shift in an organization? Would love to hear from you all. Maybe Des, you're nodding, so I'm going to start with you. How do you see this being addressing mental health as being part of a movement towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so forth?
Yeah, I was vigorously nodding because I love the question, and I'm a big fan of walking the talk. Again, as we said previously, right? We can tell people a lot of things and we can write values on walls, but until and unless we bring them to life and embody them, it often is just talk. One of the things that we've seen, to be perfectly candidly honest, is that, initially at the beginning of the pandemic, we encouraged people by saying, take time for self-care, make sure you have time for self-care. Well, what we found is that our people were so engaged and so passionate that they didn't. And so we saw people become really tired and burn out. So we got together as a leadership team and said, well, what can we do here? Number one, we can model it, because whether we like it or not, we set the tone at the top. If leaders model behavior, then your employee base will see that you practice what you preach. That's number one. Number two, we've tried to find and identify ways to operationalize self-care. So what does it mean? We implemented self-care Fridays. Initially, it was once a month. Now we're doing it twice a month, because we found that productivity didn't drop. In fact, it became higher. As we gave people these very intentional breaks, they started performing, feeling better, and then performing better, doing more creative, more innovative work. So those are some of the ways. The other thing that we try to walk the walk also by constantly being at the pulse of our people. So when we roll out these new initiatives, and the Working Parent Initiative was one of those initiatives, is rather than in a silo, making a decision, okay, let's do A, B, C, we actually go into the trenches and we talk to our people and we ask them, what is it that would be most helpful? And give us your ideas. Now, out of this body of ideas, we can execute against 2 or 3, which are the most important ones. And so then design initiatives around that. So I don't want to take up too much time. I'm clearly very passionate about this. Jennifer, what do you think?
Sure. No, I love what you're saying, and I'm actually struck by there. I mean, I think they're the big policy things to do in terms of walking the talk for leaders, and I think they're very small things. And I'll just give a quick example of something that just really struck me early in the pandemic. I have a pretty big team, and I have dogs, and my dogs would bark, and I would apologize because it was ear piercing at times. And one of my leaders pulled me aside virtually and said, "Stop apologizing. When you apologize that your dog is barking, it sends the message that having noise is not okay. And people on the team have babies and toddlers and things. So in my, complete well-intendedness, I was actually sending a message that wasn't the right message. And so I appreciated that leader stepping up and saying that to me. But I think that, walking the talk, it's like, it can be big walking, and it can be like little things like that. And then I think too, just to, really, it's so important to tie together your workforce mental health strategy with your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. I mean, I think there are a number of ways that those things come together, and I think an important aspect of that is you're just recognizing that across different groups, there's different beliefs about mental health. There's different, everybody's got their stigma, but there's, different ways that stigma plays out. And so I think really, there are different things, but they're recognizing the interconnections of those things and being really thoughtful in how you approach the topic.
Great. Yep. No, just added in, Des. I love your passion for when you were speaking about the, walking the talk and, mental health days. And certainly I think, something as simple as we're looking at, relabeling sick days to wellness days, right? So again, it's kind of taking that stigma out that it's okay to take you don't have to have an illness to take a day. If you just need a wellness day, certainly that's something should be encouraged. And one of the simplest things we did is we did global synchronous days off. So we have, global days off that are outside of our normal holidays. And it wasn't just, we're going to give you this day off, but people are still going to be working. You're still going to be getting emails. It's, the message coming out saying, this is a day off, take the time for yourself. And you're not seeing that stuff come in. And it sends the message to employees like, it's okay for me to take this day and recharge. And I know there's kind of a question that's come in about, employers who, employees who have to be on site and, kind of what can we do for that? And we certainly have a pocket of our population that are in labs and have been on site throughout the pandemic. And I think it's even more important, again, to make sure we're checking in with those employees and encouraging them to take their time, working with managers to make sure that they can be flexible when they need to be flexible. There's certainly a lot of people do have to be on site, but people should still continue to take their time, be encouraged to take their time, and not feel like for me to take my time, I have to plan and have someone else cover for what I need to do. Just, make sure that there's that ultimate flexibility. But yeah, I think it's something we're continuing to do ongoing is on the, on the synchronous days off and, added in a second company shutdown because we heard from people like, hey, those days are really what meant the most to me. So we're like, that's working and people are giving us positive feedback. It's in our best interest, all of us, to keep that going.
Awesome. And I think that was the Vertex kind of self-care day. We have another question about what is a self-care Friday. Des, would you like to expand?
I'd be happy to expand. So, as you might imagine, as a company that provides mental health care, our work, it just skyrocketed and the demand for our services skyrocketed. So we had to figure out how to hire very quickly. And then we had to figure out how to create sustainability for our people, right? Because people will weather the storm with you as long as they know you also care for them. And this is a sprint and not a marathon. You're not expected to do this indefinitely. And so one of the things that we did is implemented Self-Care Fridays. That's an additional day a month, no questions asked, that people could take off. For those who worked shifts, they could choose when that day was. A lot of our frontline workers, our therapists, coaches work shifts because we have a 24/7 service. So they got to choose when that day was for them. And that day was designated to self-care. And as I said previously, we did that once a month, and now just recently expanded it to twice a month. Because we saw the enormous impact that had on our people. So, why it might be scary to say, okay, we're gonna let people just take that day and they're gonna be off for an additional day a month. The return on investment has been enormous. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you. And there's another question about people with severe mental health challenges. And, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, having come from SAMHSA. But I know that we actually have a fairly significant distribution of people with serious mental health challenges, both in commercial populations as well as Medicaid and Medicare populations. So this is, in family members as well as people who are employed full-time. So the question is, how do we accommodate employees that have more than the mild to moderate need, or for whom, 6 sessions of virtual therapy is insufficient? Maybe I'll start with Jennifer, and then whoever else would like to jump in.
Sure. I mean, I think I'm going to a couple of different thoughts. So I would say, I think one thing is from the workforce perspective is, again, really you have to understand and work with that employee to understand what would be helpful. I think some accommodations around, mental health and what someone needs to be successful and productive at work, can look very different. And it's a little trickier than for mental health than physical health conditions, which we're a little more used to managing. So I think there's sort of that workforce aspect. In terms of care itself, that definitely has been a challenge during COVID, particularly in the really acute days of COVID, when so much of behavioral health care became virtual. And I think we all became very creative in thinking about how to provide acute care services for someone who might, not need to be inpatient, but might need intensive services, and have found ways to deliver much of that virtually. So I think there's the how do you provide the robust care and coverage for individuals for what they need, but then also how do you set them up to be successful in the workplace, and really determine what that looks like.
Great, thank you. And I do think there are also other ways, certainly, of addressing. Someone asked a question about stigma. I think in workplaces that reject stigma, right? There is no shame. There is no fault or character flaw for the individual for having a mental illness or a substance use disorder, but these are people that deserve the same level of respect, compassion, and skilled care as people with other health conditions. I think that's important, and employers that do that are doing a good thing to foster the health of their workforce overall.
Agreed.
So this is an interesting question in the chat, that women seem a little easier to engage versus males, in my experience. And so wondering if any of you have seen strategies that help engage men. I have heard from one large employer that when they, and this was actually in a manufacturing field where they had a mental health program, no one was signing up, then they changed it to mental fitness, and they got like 250 signups in 4 days. So would love to hear from any of you. Jen, would you like to start off?
Sure. Yes. Yep. And I think it kind of goes back to trying to engage different parts of the population. And I think we were just talking about kind of the stigma, right? Is there's, certainly there's, we're trying to break the barrier of mental health stigma, and mental health stigma could be from different parts of the population, gender, different cultures. So I think certainly trying to make sure that you're kind of speaking to all of your populations. And one thing that I've done or we've done is we had a webinar, actually like a fireside chat, we called it, about erasing the stigma on mental health, and had, people, some leaders and, male leaders speak about, mental health challenges that they've had, and how they, how they dealt with it, how they felt supported within the company, and kind of, paved the way to say that mental health doesn't discriminate against anybody, and it's something that can be addressed from all walks of life. So we certainly, I think, having kind of this approach of people speaking about it, and people from all different parts speaking about it, is certainly something that can help go a long way. And maybe it could be something as simple as rebranding something that might resonate with different parts of the population.
I love that.
I think that's a.
Oh, go.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead, Des.
You
No, go
please.
ahead.
Should I go? Okay. Yeah, I'll be brief.
Yeah, go.
Thank you. I really appreciate what you're saying, Jen. And it is, throughout the last couple of years, with all of these things rising to the top of our awareness, we have come to understand that the barriers to entry or barriers to access are much more charged for talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, marginalized populations. And then, in some ways, for men too, based in the male role belief system. I have to fix everything. I have to be in control of everything. And one of the things that we have found helpful, we have not had any targeted initiatives to sort of work around that stigma, but rather have tried through what we call diversity dialogues, educate people on those challenges for different people in our community, and so that people better understood what are my specific challenges. It's very difficult for me to admit that I'm struggling with mental health when I'm already somebody who comes from a marginalized community, right? Because I feel a shame around that, and it further, I feel it further stigmatizes me. And so to have very open conversations around that, share stories, help our entire community better understand where people live in those different pockets, has created a level of psychological safety that has allowed people to be much more open about this. And so we're trying to do that at a larger scale within, the context of our business as well, which is to shed light, to encourage open and courageous conversations around it, and in that way lead the way for others to feel more comfortable, to show up more authentically. So Jennifer, very sorry for the jump in.
No. I'm surprised it hasn't happened before that we're jumping on each other. No, I was similar thought, but I think that it can be very powerful, again, to have people in leadership positions, at all levels in an organization, but from a diverse perspective, speak up and be open about their own challenges, their own concerns, what's happening in their families, whatever they feel is appropriate. But I think, seeing someone who looks like you, or is your gender, or from your same background, I think that can be really powerful in decreasing stigma.
That role modeling is so important. So thank you for raising that, Jennifer. We've talked about remote work and how to engage different segments of our populations. And we talked about people who are on site and can't take time off. But what about those people who might be socially isolated? So those people who are working from home, we have colleagues who were hired by our firm and have never met anybody else in person who works here for 2 years. So what are some strategies that you've deployed to address social isolation? I'm going to start with you, Des, and then Jen or Jennifer, please jump in.
Thank you so much. Yes, isn't that something that we all in some way contended with over the last 2 years, going from being on site 100% of the time, that was me, to then starting my job at the time we were called Ginger. So as the chief people officer that came into an environment on March 20th, 2020, when the company went fully remote, and I never actually have met or sat with my people. It was a very, very odd thing, and it felt odd at the beginning. And quite frankly, I thought, I thrive on proximity and being close to our people, the nonverbal communication, all of that. I thought, how on earth am I going to do a good job in that context? But we were all in the same storm, I think, as Jennifer said, not in the same boat, but in the same storm. So we had to figure it out really, really quickly. How do we build community virtually? Fortunately, we are in a place now where we can slowly gather in small groups. So that is happening. But throughout the year, we just really focused and dedicated an entire team to the people experience and how can we create connection and embed it into all of our operational processes. And, sure, there are some things like we have created, now we have the Happy Dot Lounge where people showcase talents. We also did a virtual all hands offsite for 2 days where people not only showcased their work, but also got an opportunity to socialize, around. I think one of the things were cooking something together. The other one was, mixing cocktails, alcoholic and non-alcoholic and things like that. But it is definitely something that I think we need to continue to pay attention to. We're not going to go back to the way it was. People are actually enjoying hybrid work. They're appreciating having more time with their families and their children. So if we talk about, we did earlier about the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, I think that is a trend that's very clear. It will continue and is a place where especially people leaders will have to pay close attention.
Yeah, and I'll jump into it. I definitely agree, right? Certainly it's, the last 2 years, right, immediately we had to shift to going to a completely, virtual environment. And I think, right, there were some learnings right off the bat. And I think part of it, kind of the silver lining, if we'll focus on that, is that especially like if you work with a global workforce and global counterparts that you may not have kind of seen face to face, I feel like that part of it, you felt more connected from your kind of global workforce. But I think something we're focusing on is, especially as we, go back to the office in person and we have our flexible work policy going live with some people being hybrid, some people being remote, and some people being on site, is, we establish kind of listening circles with, if you're a remote employee, what are some of the tools you need or what are concerns you have in being in a remote workforce, and the same with hybrid. And, we saw a lot of people, especially the remote, like, that I felt like, am I going to miss out on some career opportunities because I'm missing those in between, walking to the kitchen, those conversations or different things. So I think we're just, continue to focus on making sure that you're making sure you're including everybody and that things aren't geared to just on-site or, just virtual, that we're kind of doing and looking at things and making sure that we're connecting all of our employees and, things like the virtual happy hours, but then also recognizing some people, the thought of like a virtual happy hour or talking virtually, doing a trivia it can induce sheer anxiety, right? So it's also not like forcing people to do things and, recognizing we need those Zoom free Fridays or wellness Wednesdays.
Great. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it has been interesting, both the, where people fall on the sort of introversion, extroversion spectrum. And, I think some of the, things like virtual happy hours or, or other team kinds of things, also in my team have done things, sort of virtual buddies for people who haven't, known each other, but where it's not the big group, but, where you feel like you have someone like you would, go sit at lunch if you were in the office. And it's also, again, like we're not all in the same boat. I think there are people who really have struggled with isolation and loneliness, particularly in the earlier days of COVID. And then on the flip side, people who are, working in a small space with a lot of people present, whether it's family members or roommates, and the stress that has as well. So I think it's, again, not one size fits all, but I think there are some good approaches for folks who are feeling isolated, and also some good tools and resources that can help people feel more connected beyond just the workplace.
So thank you, Jennifer. And I see a really important question in the chat about how can employers balance mental health needs and the company's performance needs, which I find interesting. I think at the frontline manager level, I'm sure it can be difficult and challenging to manage when somebody has a last minute need to take time off. However, I think the data would tell us that the companies that do invest in mental health for their employees have both lower healthcare costs as well as lower loss to attrition, presenteeism, absenteeism, like with a 4-to-1 ROI. But I would love for coming back to Jennifer first, and then others jump in. But how do you see employers balancing those needs between attending to people's day-to-day as well as job performance?
Yeah, I think that, well, something that you just said in your comment, Kana, I think that it's very important that all levels of leadership are aligned. So I think often at the C-suite level, there is an understanding of, this is an important business strategy, and you have to, we will have better outcomes as a business and in terms of, retention and engagement, all of those things, if we do make this a part of how we work. And I think then sometimes at different levels of management below, where you're focused more on the day-to-day, sometimes it doesn't translate all the way down, and that disconnect can be a real source of dissatisfaction and stress for employees. So I think making sure it sort of is a message at all levels of leadership. I think someone had talked about like a sprint versus a marathon. I think when this started, we were all in a sprint. I mean, I think depending upon what you did, but certainly speaking from healthcare, it felt like it was 24 hours a day. And then there was a realization of like, oh, we're not going to go back to normal anytime soon. And so we got to pace ourselves. And so I think at that point, employers not only have focused more on workforce mental health, but also on really reevaluating business needs and priorities and pivoting from doing everything we had been doing in the past to what are the things we need to do now. And I think being transparent about that with employees. So there's, been some reprioritization and balancing of work that, just a realization that we have to do things differently, and we're not going to be able to maintain an engaged and healthy workforce if we continue to have the same level of urgency that we did at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and just quickly to follow up, I think, right, it's kind of that whole like proactive versus reactive, right? I think if you continue to be reactive, then that's when you're going to see if more people leaving or more people needing to go out on leave or take time off last minute. And I certainly think that well-being needs to be at the center of, or one of the most important pillars of making sure that employees are supported. And I think, balancing the business needs, and I think it's exactly what you said, Jennifer, is that there needs to be those conversations that needs to happen at the C-suite level, at the other levels, that needs to be a big part of kind of the one, business values, employee value proposition. Certainly things that we need to make sure we're focusing on, because Kenna, you kind of hit the nail on the head, is that if you have supportive programs and supportive needs, it actually in the long run is helping your company. It's helping your productivity. It's helping employees' engagement. So I think it's just having those open and honest conversations. And I think the last 2 years have helped us see the value when we need to focus on this as a core part of our pillars and our well-being.
I totally agree with the both of you. Proactive versus reactive has been my mantra over the last 2 years. You are both so spot on. And the only thing that I would add to this, because I've seen it in vivo, in practice, in our business, is in the spirit of being proactive, provide people support early, and provide resources that meet them and can address needs at all ends of the spectrum. Even early on, somebody, is having a rough week, deliverables that make it feel overwhelming. They can access a meditation to ground. They can chat with their mental health coach real quick, just to level set, to help them differentiate between, the important versus the urgent work, and then prioritize. I think in the spirit of being proactive, that the approach to also proactively provide care when people are not yet at a place where they're starting to burn out is so super important. We have to get more disciplined about how we run our businesses. For 2 years, we've all gone fully virtual. This is still very new to most of us. We're still learning how to interact with one another in that context effectively. You know, what's come up a lot for us is, you know, the avalanche of emails that everybody's drowning on because we're not together, right? How can we do that better? How can we run our meetings more concisely? We go in with a crisp agenda, a desired outcome, pre-read so people can come in and, you know, then after a crisp meeting, go back to their work and stay caught up on their mailboxes and all the other things that they're doing. And operationalizing those things and ways to become more efficient, I think is also something, you know, we're just at the front end of it and getting better of it. But I think that there are more opportunities for doing that better as well.
So certainly a prevention theme on that one. And just as a more immediate sense for the question around how to balance those needs, I think I would just encourage you to look at what you do for people with urgent healthcare needs. You know, is it equally frustrating if someone has to take time off because they broke a leg or they are having they have a spasm in their back? You know, I think we just need to remember that these are health conditions like other health conditions, and to the degree to which we work with our health plans and our other you know, providers and services to keep people healthy is one thing, and also just treating people with the same respect as people that are struggling, and doing that with our clients and our customers and our vendors and others, showing that we're giving that same respect, I think is important. Yeah. So I would like, just in a quick 10-20 seconds, last note to finish on. Please tell me, what are you most optimistic about, and how do you see thriving in the workplace looking in the future? So we'll start with Jennifer.
Sure. So I am just most encouraged and excited about this decrease in stigma and the fact that mental health at the workplace or in the workforce has become such a common topic. So that I'm very encouraged by that. When I think about a thriving workforce, I think it's a workforce that are a culture that is evolving, that is flexible, that listens to employees and takes action. I think also where there's a focus on meaning and what is sort of the meaning of the work and the personal meaning that people get out of it. So that's my summary.
Great, thanks, Jen.
Yep, and I will go. I think I completely agree with everything you just said, Jennifer. I think it's, you know, I'm excited that, you know, and optimistic about that mental health and well-being are really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds when it may not have been just a few years ago, you know, from whether it's from employees, from senior leaders. So I'm optimistic that, you know, we can continue this momentum. It's not just something that we're just reacting to, that word again at the pandemic, but it's something that we know needs to be a future focus and not just something that is something we're doing right now. And it's something that needs to continue to evolve. And I think to be thriving is exactly as that people can come to work, they feel that they're supported, they feel that they can be their true selves, that they feel like they can speak up, and they feel that they're you know, they're certainly supported from a well-being, from a holistic, from a mental health perspective.
Awesome, thank you. And Des, you have the last word.
Thank you. Yes, you know, while the last couple of years have not been easy, I've also seen all of us come together in ways that are unprecedented, and quite frankly, together we have accomplished so much. Elevated the importance and cultivation of psychological safety in the workplace. All of us together. We've accelerated a shift to more flexible ways of working without much loss in productivity. 90% of employees report that their mental health and family bonds have benefited from increased work from home flexibility. CEOs now overwhelmingly believe that employees' mental health needs impacts business outcomes, and thereby bankrolling, you know, some of these initiatives that we're rolling out and prioritizing employee wellness in their budgets. Employees many employees have reported a high level of productivity when they felt that their, in turn, employers, when their employers cared for them, they felt valued and wanted to give back, offer that care back to their employer and their businesses. We've accelerated DEIB efforts and initiatives, and our workplaces are better for it. One last one, not directly related, but something I'm very excited about, the shift to telemedicine has enabled access to care for millions of people who previously couldn't access it, whether it was because they lived in remote geographies or because their physical ability didn't allow them to easily access care. That has changed. And that's been a collective effort. And those are the things that leave me very excited and optimistic for what's ahead for all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer, Jen, Desiree, for your insightful comments. Thank you to Health Go Live and Headspace for convening this event. And thank you to our audience for participating and really fueling our rich discussion.
Thank you to Kana and all of our panelists. Please visit our website at hlth.com to catch up on all Health Go Live webinars. And join us at the inaugural Vive event, the industry's new health information and technology event, coming to Miami Beach, March 6th through 9th, 2022.